Welcome to Firing Line. I'm Michael Kinsley of the New Republic magazine. The surprise bestseller of the fall literary season is a book called Final Exit by Mr. Buckley's guest, Derek Humphry. Final Exit is not a Gothic novel or a politician's memoir. It is a how-to book on committing suicide. It contains detailed instructions and dosages and techniques for self-administering a painless death. Shortly after publication, it shot to #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And in fact, Mr. Humphry says there are 400,000 of them in print now. Mr. Humphry, born in Britain, is executive director of the Hemlock Society, an organization dedicated to legitimizing people's right to commit suicide. In an earlier book, Mr. Humphry described how he helped his first wife to kill herself when she was terminally ill with cancer. To its supporters, Mr. Humphry's book is a response to the depersonalization and technological obsession of modern medicine, which aims to prolong life at all costs, including the cost to the patient. By choosing death with dignity, a terminally ill person ironically regains control over his or her life, sparing himself or herself months of suffering and humiliation. Or so the argument goes. Mr. Humphry's opponents argue that he is facilitating suicide by people who may be only temporarily depressed, not just terminally ill. Some even say he is providing useful instructions for would-be murderers. Mr. Buckley, can you imagine any circumstances in which you personally would wish to have a copy of Mr. Humphry's book handy?
Well, I have a eclectic library. I even had a copy of Devised when they were writing a book called Shall We Burn Devised? So the answer is I do have a copy of his book, which I find technically interesting. As a matter of fact, I find it philosophically interesting. But I'd like to begin by asking you a question that you probably don't get asked too often. Do you acknowledge any metaphysical principles of ethical nature?
Metaphysical. You mean, do I believe in God? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that would...
Do I believe in a supreme deity?
If you do, you would. But a lot of people don't believe in God, still acknowledge metaphysical principles.
No, I don't think I do. I think the answer
So therefore, all laws, as far as you're concerned, are purely positive. That is to say, born purely of experience.
Yes, there's civil law and there's moral law, moral justice, doing the right thing.
So that if it were provable scientifically, let's say, that a particular race had a higher incidence of evil habits than another race, you would not acknowledge any metaphysical reluctance to deal harshly with that race.
You're getting into an area I know nothing of, I'm sorry.
Oh, well, if you know nothing of that, a lot of things don't surprise me any longer. Most people are guided prescriptively, i.e. by what they were born acknowledging, and also by reference to a religion, usually a religion, or to a set of metaphysical principles. And one of those traditionally has been that nobody should kill anybody. Now your whole thesis is that it's okay to kill somebody, provided you're convinced, and he's convinced, that you're doing strategically the kind thing, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Now, but in order to do that, you trespass on, as I say, formally accepted metaphysical principles. The Hippocratic Oath is no longer exacted of everybody who becomes a doctor, but for thousands of years was.
Yeah.
You simply challenge that oath, don't you?
I do. I think it's the nonsense of the medical world, devised 2,500 years ago by a group of Greeks, has served medical profession over the centuries through the Dark Ages, when medicine was so much connected with the occult and magic and so forth. But in this age, I think the Hippocratic Oath is a nonsense. It has no application.
Well,
you
talk about it as being nonsense. Did Descartes or Immanuel Kant or John Stuart Mill object to it? Or was it just you who discovered it was nonsensical?
No, because very few doctors in America are asked to swear it. Most medical schools have dropped it long before.
If it was nonsense, philosophical nonsense, who discovered that it was nonsense other than yourself?
Doctors. and teachers of doctrine.
Well, what about I'm talking about ethical philosophers who tend to be more interesting than doctors on subjects of this kind.
Because the Hippocratic Oath...
Do you know any major philosophical figure who has spoken against the Hippocratic Oath?
Joseph Fletcher.
Who?
Joseph Fletcher.
Well, he's so distinguished I'd never heard of him. I mean, anybody that...
Well, we all have gaps in our knowledge, and that's a gap in your knowledge.
That might be a lacuna.
I mean, ethics, he's one of the major ethicists. He, situation ethics, his books on situation ethics have been the most important.
Well, any situation ethicist would, of course, disagree on this particular point, but of the kind of people that one at least used to study when one studied philosophy at college, whether in England or here, was there anybody that you ever ran into who thought that the Hippocratic Oath was, to quote you, nonsense?
No, I've never studied philosophy. You know, and I never read a book on philosophy, I don't think.
Well, is that manifest, you think, in your writing?
Probably, yes. I'm just a practical journalist and author. I didn't go to college, I didn't go to university. I've never read a book on philosophy. As such, I've never read Schopenhauer or Kant or so forth.
Well, might this be a reason why you feel so footloose in challenging some major postulates that have been arrived at by people who have studied philosophy?
I'm not footloose. It's my conviction that, for instance, the Hippocratic Oath is bunkum, and many other people share that. So I'm not alone. I'm not an iconoclast in that sense.
No, I didn't say you were alone.
But I've derived my philosophy of life from what I've observed over the 60 years of my life, and experiences and observation, not based on philosophical study.
Well, but does it give you no sense of apprehension that you should use only your own experience to challenge postulates that were accepted by just about every important philosophical figure?
No, it doesn't bother me. No. They may be right, I may be right. You take your choice.
Well, the business of taking one's choice is a subject that's coming up legally, isn't it? That is to say, the law right now forbids the kind of activity that you advertise.
Yes.
And that is settled common law practice. It forbids doctors from killing. Now, what is your program to change that law?
To ask the public to change the law, that this is a decision society should take in a democratic manner, and the Right to Die movement is putting it in front of the public, notably in Washington State and in California, and follow on in other states. Let the public decide whether or not they've read the philosophers. Society makes laws. Philosophers may guide us and give input, but society makes and adapts and modifies laws.
Well, we have in America a thing called the Constitution, which puts it a little bit less glibly. Society doesn't make certain laws. Certain laws can only be made.
You're right. No, I can see that. But laws connected with the sort we're talking about, society does lay down the rules.
Well, you know, I'm not 100% sure of that. Have you done constitutional research on that?
No.
Suppose they were to authorize murder in the state of Washington. Would that satisfy you that murder was okay in the state of Washington?
Certainly not. No.
But
it would be both legally and morally wrong.
Well, but it is. But you're proposing what would now be classified as murder.
No.
When Dr. Jones tells her, "Okay, I'll kill you," since that's what you want, that is classified as murder.
At the moment, it could be, yes.
By common law.
And I think it's time to take a more intelligent look at that definition that you made and say there are some occasions when death by request justifies the doctor killing the patient, where it is societally approved, if it is, and I think it will be, and where it is done carefully and by request in a voluntary method.
Why do you require social approval of this? You said a moment ago that you were guided by your own conscience, and your own conscience says it's okay. So why can't you disagree with this society?
Well, I'm speaking for myself. You know, I have my own views, and then there is a wider view.
Well,
and I'm one of the leaders of a movement that says, of many thousands of people, which says that it's time to change the law. Mm. So I speak with two hats.
Yeah, but you feel free to exercise your executive capacity to kill, do you not? If you think that the surrounding circumstances are hospitable, irrespective of what the law says.
Yes, I do. I mean, I broke the law on two occasions, when I helped my wife to die and I helped my father-in-law to die. Mm-hmm. I regretted doing that very much. The actual breaking the law. I was glad to help them. I thought it was a decent and honorable and loving thing to do to help them. I found it regretful that I had to break the law, because I am not a hardened lawbreaker. I'm a very law-abiding person. But I think that in this respect the law is wrong, and I have set myself out in concert with others to modify this law to be more intelligent. The law, I believe, must move with the times and must move with public opinion. And I think there is a welter of evidence that public opinion seeks to modify the law on assisted suicide.
Well, but aren't you assuming here that public opinion is reliable in matters? But public opinion has done some pretty dark deeds in this century.
It's also done a lot of good things. It's the way in which we run this country, thank goodness. We have you know, a democracy here. We do things by the vote. We vote in senators or presidents. We vote, and on the West Coast in particular, they have initiatives where they vote in laws or vote out laws. And this is the route we choose, to ask the public what it wants.
I'm in favor of self-government, but I'm also in favor of constitutional prohibitions against impulsive action.
Yes, so much.
Because public opinion sometimes acts to its discredit. Now, when you committed, what would you call it, an act of civil disobedience in respect of your wife and your father-in-law?
It was a crime.
It was a crime. And did they prosecute you?
No, I wasn't prosecuted.
Why?
The first offence was in England, where the penalty can be up to 14 years imprisonment. When it became known that I had helped my wife to die, I gave the police a confession, said, yes, I did do it, no question, because I believed it was the right thing to do. There is a clause in English law which says that the prosecutor can use his discretion not to prosecute, even if there is a hard and fast case. He can look at the facts and in this particular crime say, no, I won't prosecute. In the case in America where I helped my father-in-law to die, nobody knew about it, so it didn't come to the attention of the police.
Well, it has now, presumably.
Yes. But this goes on, hundreds of these cases go on all the time. This is the secret crime of our times. There are hundreds and hundreds of cases in America alone of helping people to die illegally. Doctors also helping people to die illegally. And I think that cries out for a change in the law. Something is amiss with the existing law. And we should put it to the vote, should this law be changed.
Well, if is your appetite to do this because you would like to synchronize behavior with law, or because you want to encourage what you say goes on rampantly anyway, to increase...
No, I don't want to encourage it, I want to legitimize it. It shouldn't be done secretly. This sort of thing is a very serious matter, and it's wrong for it to be done covertly. It should be done in the open with proper responsibility. Secrecy should not obtain here, and therefore, but it's done secretly because people fear prosecution.
Well, assuming that it were licensed, you would then run into certain other obstacles, obviously, such as how to establish that somebody was acting responsibly to himself or herself when he opted for death. There was that exhibitionist doctor from the West Coast, I forget his name, who sort of flew out to Montana or someplace to try out his death machine on some woman with whom he spent 72 hours and then quickly did the deed.
You're referring to Dr. Kawork in the
That's
Midwest.
That's the guy, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The woman flew to him, not he
To
to the
him,
woman.
Now, this is something which, under the ideal law as you envision it, would or would not be permitted.
It would be permitted. Janet Adkins would have been able to ask her own doctor in her hometown if he or she would help her under the proposed law, and that doctor could, if they felt like it, help her to die. She wouldn't have had to fly 2,000 miles to Michigan to this rebel doctor.
But if you measure by some Bentham calculus pleasure versus pain, and decide that the pain outweighs the prospective pleasure, mightn't there be a very good philosophical case for killing people much earlier? For instance, let's say a teenager who faces life as a cripple. Would you draw the line at a particular point saying it is wrong to assist this particular person to commit suicide on the grounds that he might very well simply be suffering from melancholia?
Yes, I do. I do draw the line on that, yes. I don't think unhappy people, disturbed people, people in temporary dependency...
Democrats?
Pardon?
Democrats?
They do not deserve assistance in suicide. They deserve the right, the help to live where possible, as much help to live. And it is not in our credo, in our plans, to change the law to assist them.
Well, what objection would you have if the state of Washington disagreed with you and the majority of the people said, since we're going in this direction, we will try to administer a pain-pleasure test, and we'll apply that to everybody, beginning, say, at age 6. And those of them who are convincingly, who believe that life bears more tears than laughter, they can ask the doctor to snuff it out.
Well, I would argue against that, and I think most people would. I think the demand for assisted suicide is coming in a genuine way from people who are suffering or who have witnessed the suffering of their loved ones, and they know it is avoidable. They're people who want the right to choose to die, to exercise their free will, and their right to go when they wish.
Well, but this is a right you...
Any other variation, like the hypothesis you offer, wouldn't get off the ground. The public wouldn't accept it. The public's far more practical and realistic.
But don't you make it possible for people to avoid that inconvenience? Because in your book, you don't need a doctor to put you away. All you have to do is read a couple of your chapters, and you can do it yourself. So that you can take a 16-year-old girl who's been jilted and is convinced that she'll never be happy again, and she simply opens the pages of your book, and hesto presto, she's not an unhappy girl, she's a dead little girl.
Well, they've been doing it for years, haven't they? I mean, suicide is endemic in mankind. People have been killing themselves since day one. The government records 30,000 suicides a year. In this country, it's probably double that, because there's a lot are not detected. People who want to kill themselves because they cannot, for some reason, cope with life, have always found a way to kill themselves. They've never needed a book, and I don't think they will need a book. The plans, the ideas put forward in my book use prescription drugs. They take time. Ideally, you need somebody with you. The book says in very careful chapters, tell your family you're going to take your life, and hear what the response is. Tell your doctor you're going to take your life.
But this
is not a suicide manual. Yeah. This is a step-by-step
Well,
step
it
through.
it may not have been intended as a suicide manual, but do you doubt it will be used by many people as a suicide manual?
Some may be. But then the world is full of, newspapers are full of reports of how suicides take place. And there are numerous movies in which suicide is demonstrated. The Bell Jar with Sylvia Plath demonstrates how you actually see that it is best to cut your wrist one way and not the other. In Coming Home, the movie, you see a young man injecting air into his veins. In newspaper reports, which I collect, and they're there for all to see, there are numerous detailed reports of how people commit suicide. So the information is there anyway. Same with the drug dosages. All bookstores have got, and technical bookstores have got the better books on drug dosages. You can walk into bookstores, especially those near a university. You can flick open the page to morphine or secobarbital, and you can see what the lethal dose is, shut the book and go away. So this information is out there anyway.
Yeah, you don't need graduate study to discover that you will die if you jump off the top of the Empire State Building.
Well,
so in that sense, I think the case is conceded. But it is true that it seems to me that just as you record that there have been a lot of suicides, there are a lot of people who survived their suicide attempt and haven't tried a second attempt, and a lot of those people die happy. But haven't you done your best to cut down the number of unsuccessful impulsive attempts at suicide?
No. If a person is determined, all the psychiatrists I talk to and hear and listen at conferences and say if a person is truly determined to commit suicide, they will. And if they fail the first time, they'll do it the second time. It's a very sad matter. My book is not addressed to this problem. My book is addressed to the 2 million people who die every year of terminal illness in this country. They apparently want access to my book. We're talking of 2 million recorded terminal ill deaths against 30,000 suicides. I think the preponderance there is that these people, the 2 million, have the right, if they wish, to read my book, and shouldn't be denied it because of the other problem, much smaller problem, of suicide, which must be tackled. We must resist. We must seek to prevent suicide of unhappy people as best as possible. That's another issue. The terminally ill people.
You're distinguishing between suicide and euthanasia, in other words.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But you said just a moment ago that suicide is something that people can bring off if they are determined, or call it euthanasia. Why can't they bring off euthanasia if they're determined?
Because
unless they're physically crippled.
Well, usually they are very crippled by the time they want to die. And that's part of our credo. You should fight for your life. You should use medical facilities as much as possible. And the sort of people that are in the euthanasia movement, or feel the same as I do, want to die gently in the presence of their loved ones. And the violent means of guns or knives or jumping do not appeal to them. They want to die together with their loved ones.
Why?
And therefore they need drugs and the proper use of drugs.
I mean, I'm happily married, but I have absolutely no anxiety to be physically present when my wife dies, nor do I think that she must be physically present when I die. Or in some of her moods she might be. But why is this a part of the conjugal termination scene in your understanding of it?
Well, your statement, it runs contrary to all the information I've ever picked up, is that people do want to be with one another as they die.
Excuse me, I have to interrupt at this point. Mr. Buckley, 400,000 people have bought Mr. Humphry's book, and I think most of them have not bought it just to have it in their library, as you perhaps did. Obviously, it addresses some strongly felt need or problem in modern society. I wonder what you think that need is.
No, I acknowledge that, and it seems to me plain that even strongly committed Christians can pray that such and such a person who is suffering will die. But we're dealing, with that ultimate authority of taking life away from somebody, or making it making it convenient for somebody to do that. And I think that that poses moral questions of a very inhibiting kind.
Sure. Well, as your argument here for the past half hour has basically been the one of the slippery slope. But obviously it can lead to all sorts of nightmare situations, but isn't there a problem that we should move a little bit further down that slope to address?
Well, certainly I think in terms of public discussion, which the book certainly precipitates as witness the fact that we're all here. Thank you very much, Mr. Humphry.
Thank
you, Mr. Kinsley, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen of St. Elizabeth.
Next week, Firing Line reprises its highly important and entertaining program on nuclear waste disposal with William F. Buckley, Jr. hosting Charles Hollister of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute and Arjun Makanjani of the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research. Funding for Firing